Scorn is a game that sort of felt like an urban legend for many years. It was always a thing that people talked about, but we never knew if it was actually going to come out. It got announced back in 2014, and it had a viral gameplay demo hit the internet in 2016, but since then, news was scarce. It was always still there, but there was never anything more than cryptic messages or the very occasional teaser image. And as the years went on, and we got into the 2020s, it seemed like it might turn into yet another viral indie trailer turned failed game, destined to an endless development hell before it eventually sinks into obscurity. But thankfully, it was picked up by Microsoft in mid-2020, and the devs were able to finish it up and get it ready for release. So now with it finally here 8 years after the reveal, how did it turn out? Well, it's a bit hard to lay it out in one sentence, and truthfully my thoughts are still a bit scrambled, but I can say that at the very least it is 100% worth giving a look. Scorn is best described as a horror, adventure, puzzle game FPS, and as you can clearly see, it has some of the most interesting world design of any video game. The art is directly inspired by H.R. Giger and Zdzisław Beksiński with this gorgeously grotesque alien world that shifts and writhes as you make your way through it. It's certainly off the beaten path for most modern games, so I think it was always destined to be a bit divisive, especially since it is short. But the biggest talking point on the internet right now seems to be about the game's puzzles, which are actually alienating some people within the first 20 minutes. Now look, the game was never marketed as some fast-paced FPS, so if you went in with the expectation that it was going to be Doom, well, I don't even know where you would have gotten that impression from, but you're definitely going to be disappointed. But even so, some people who went in with an open mind were still taken aback by just how ridiculously obtuse and unfair these bullshit puzzles are. If that wasn't clear, yes, I am being sarcastic, and if I'm honest, I think every complaint about how unfair or obtuse the puzzles are is a major self-report that you're either too used to the excessive hand-holding of mindless puzzles in most AAA games, or maybe you're just not the brightest bulb in the box. Look, it's a puzzle game, okay? Getting stuck on something for several minutes is not a flaw with the game. That's the design. That's how puzzles are supposed to work. You need to figure it out. That's the point. If puzzle games just simply aren't your thing, that's fine. But God forbid a game actually makes you figure stuff out for once. If you think these puzzles are obtuse, you ain't seen obtuse puzzles, my friend. Now that's not to suggest that the ones in Scorn are super easy or anything, as they will require actual brain usage on the side of the player, but I don't think there's a single one that is obtuse or nonsensical with its logic. I think the more accurate reason people are upset at them comes from the fact that there isn't any hand-holding, and Scorn doesn't give you notifications or jingles to signify that you're doing the right thing or if you're going in the right direction. But personally, I love this choice. To me, being thrown into the deep end with no form of guidance is a major factor in what made the game so enjoyable. This is a truly rotten, desolate, hostile hellscape of a world, and having to experience it from the point of view of a nameless lost soul fits perfectly. Neither you nor the protagonist truly knows what you're doing or why you're doing it. You just know that you need to keep going. There is no dialogue or clear narrative to follow, it's just a descent into hell and back again. This is where the gameplay and world design are at their most harmonious, where the game begs you to go deeper and you have no choice but to persevere and try to piece things together for yourself. The world creaks and moans around you, and the thick, droning ambience does a great job of conveying the tone, and simply sitting in the world for a few minutes is still a really sick experience. And contrary to a lot of the complaints, the opening section is actually one of my favorite parts, and I love the way it basically throws you into this giant room full of weird contraptions and just leaves you to your own devices, which should give you all you need to know about the game right off the bat. It's a very oppressive experience, and the atmosphere is almost suffocatingly bleak. It feels like every function of the world is just a cycle of cruelty, death, and rebirth. It's also fairly gruesome, with plenty of moments that are both hauntingly beautiful and utterly repulsive in all the best ways. There's even one puzzle that I won't spoil here, but man, completing it made me feel pretty uncomfortable, which I thought was cool. Now, not every puzzle is as interesting as that one, and some are a bit simple, but just within the context of the world, there wasn't a single puzzle that I thought was bad because simply exploring further was very entertaining. Unfortunately though, I don't think Scorn is all smooth sailing, and as you've probably noticed, I haven't yet mentioned the other part of the gameplay, the combat. And that would be because, well, it's just because it's not good. Now, truthfully, I don't despise the combat, and I actually think it works well in some aspects, but there's no denying that it's less than ideal. It is a survival horror game, so going guns blazing is never the main focus, but there are several moments where the game will force you to fight head-on, and it just feels jank. It's definitely not the worst survival horror combat I've seen. Fucking stupid piece of shit. But it ain't Resident Evil either. However, there are a few moments where the game actually presents a few clever ways to skirt around some of the encounters, and I really wish this would have been the main focus of the combat because, while rare, it actually works really well. Like, for example, this instance where I lured the enemy out and then closed the gate to trap it on the other side and poked it through the fence for an easy kill. Or when this one was blocking my path, so I guided it into the winding hallways and then looped back around and made a break for the newly cleared pathway. If more of the game was designed like this, I think it would work really well, but giving you a shitty shotgun and throwing you into a room full of blobs that charge and shoot poison just ends up feeling pretty rough and occasionally frustrating, as one late game encounter in particular drags on forever and definitely did not need to be as long or intensive as it was. Though, I will admit, part of me thinks that maybe that's the point. I mean, it is fitting that a world so oppressive would have combat that puts you at a disadvantage and really makes it a struggle. However, I do think there's a distinct difference between making combat you dread because it's daunting / has consequences and making combat you dread because it's just simply annoying and not very fun. And unfortunately, I think Scorn tips the scale in the latter direction. So I do get why people are off-put by the combat because, yeah, it's just not good. But personally, it's really not enough to deter me from experiencing the rest of the game. And honestly, even if you die a fair bit, it's still only like maybe a 75-25 split of puzzles and exploration versus combat. So the rest of the game more than made up for it in my opinion. So with that said, I mean clearly the game worked for me, but I can understand where the whole experience may be a bit too much for some people, whether it's the open nature of the puzzles, the jank combat, the oppressing atmosphere, or some combination of the three. But I found it truly memorable, and I think it's a shining beacon of the short and weird gaming experiences that we don't get nearly enough of nowadays. If you've seen my open world video, you know I really dislike overly inflated long video games, so when a weird little game comes along that gets in, gets weird, and gets out in just over 5 hours or so, I will always appreciate that. There are a few other minor issues I could raise with the occasional small bug I found, or the structure of certain sections, but I think I've said my piece with the game, and honestly, I don't know if I care enough to really go into any more minor details because at the end of the day, I just thought it was really fucking cool. It was occasionally frustrating, sure, but it's just such a wildly unique experience, and for that alone, I think it's worth giving a shot if you're at all interested. It's most certainly not going to click with everyone, and if it doesn't for you, I'm sorry to hear that because man did it work for me. If you have Game Pass, there is no reason not to check it out, and if you don't have Game Pass, I think it's worth buying a month of it just for this game alone. Like I said, it's not a completely smooth ride, but there's enough in here that I think it's pretty awesome, and for that, it makes it easily one of my favorite games of the year, flaws and all. If I had to rate it, I guess it would sit somewhere in like the 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 range, but I don't feel like rating it this time, so I won't. I liked it, it was a bit jank, but very memorable, and I'd recommend it. Alright, thanks for watching guys. I know this wasn't my normal structure, but it just felt weird trying to break the game up into sections, and my head is still spinning a bit from the experience, so I wanted to go more freeform on this one. And sorry for the lack of videos in the past few months. I was actually sick for quite a while and couldn't really record anything, but I do have some other reviews in the works, and I also put out a few short films earlier in the year that you should check out if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video, hopefully soon.